Be honest, if you walked into a closed Hollywood soundstage and saw two legends squared off chest to chest, no cameras rolling, no director calling action, just tension thick enough to taste, would you believe that a single shove during rehearsal nearly blew the whole production apart? Because that's exactly what happened the day John Wayne decided he'd had enough and called Spencer Tracy's bluff, and what began as a method experiment turned into a raw test of pride, power, and respect that nobody in that room would ever forget. It's late 1940s Hollywood, the golden age on the surface, but underneath it's a pressure cooker of egos, reputations, and unspoken rules, and inside one cavernous soundstage the air hangs heavy with heat from the lights and cigarette smoke curling toward the rafters. Crew members shifting quietly as they wait for rehearsal to begin, everyone aware they're witnessing something rare. John Wayne and Spencer Tracy sharing space. Two men who represent completely different ideas of what it means to be an actor and a man. Tracy arrives first, compact and coiled, jacket off, sleeves rolled, face already locked into that familiar scowl of concentration. The look that's won him 2 Academy Awards and a reputation as the most serious actor in the business. A man who doesn't rehearse so much as dominate, who believes truth comes from pressure and discomfort, who's known for pushing scenes past the edge because directors let him, because studios trust him, because nobody wants to be the one who tells Spencer Tracy to tone it down. The crew knows his habits. He prowls during rehearsal, invades space, snaps lines like punches, tests whoever stands across from him, and most actors take it, grateful just to survive the scene. Then John Wayne walks in, filling the doorway without trying, tall, broad, moving slow and deliberate like a man who doesn't waste energy, his reputation already cemented with audiences, but still questioned by critics who whisper that he's stiff, that he plays the same man every time, that he isn't real, the way Tracy is, and Wayne hears those whispers even when he pretends he doesn't. He nods to a few crew members, exchanges a quiet word with the director, then takes his mark, eyes steady, posture relaxed. And that's when Tracy looks him over, not with friendliness but with curiosity, like a boxer sizing up a new opponent, and casually, too casually, he drops it into the room. Let's make it real this time. The words hang there, vague but loaded, and a few heads turn because everyone knows what Tracy means by real. Wayne doesn't bite right away. He just asks, calm as desert heat, "What do you mean by real?" Tracy shrugs, a half-smile tugging at his mouth, and says he doesn't believe in pretending, that if a scene calls for force it should feel like force, that he never pulls punches in rehearsal, because truth doesn't come from safety. And a silence follows because this is Tracy's territory. This is where younger actors nod and go along. But Wayne doesn't nod. He steps a little closer, still calm, still quiet, and says, "You put hands on me without warning, and we're done acting." And now the room tightens because no one talks to Tracy like that. Not in rehearsal, not ever. Tracy's eyes narrow, amused more than offended, and he takes a small step forward, asking, "You worried, Duke?" And the assistant director clears his throat, sensing trouble, suggesting they just run the lines. And for a moment it looks like the tension might dissolve into routine. They take their places, the rehearsal begins, voices rising as the scene demands, the dialogue sharp and confrontational. Two men locked in a fictional power struggle that feels a little too close to reality. And the crew watches Tracy closely because this is where he usually tests people. Then it happens, mid-line. No cue, no choreography. Tracy shoves Wayne square in the chest, a hard, sudden push meant to surprise, meant to assert control, meant to prove a point. And Wayne stumbles back half a step before catching himself, boots scraping against the floor, the sound echoing in the vast space as everything stops. No one breathes. No one speaks. Wayne looks at Tracy, not angry, not shocked, just measuring him. And for a split second the room expects Wayne to explode or retreat, because that's how these moments usually end. But instead Wayne steps forward and shoves Tracy back. Harder, cleaner. A blunt response that sends Tracy stumbling into a prop table, coffee cup shattering on the floor as gasps ripple through the crew. Wayne doesn't raise his voice, doesn't posture, just says evenly, "That was me being polite," and the director rushes in now, hands up, voice cracking as he calls for a stop. But the damage is already done because something real has finally happened. not in the scene but between the men, and Tracy straightens himself, eyes burning, demanding if Wayne thinks he's tough because he plays cowboys, and Wayne answers without heat, "I think you're used to people letting you get away with things." And that's the moment everyone realizes this isn't about acting styles anymore. It's about boundaries, and as Wayne turns away first, walking back to his mark like nothing happened, the room stays frozen, waiting to see what Tracy will do next, because whatever comes after this shove is going to set the tone for everything that follows. Nobody moves at first, because in Hollywood you don't often see a line crossed so cleanly that everyone knows it at the same time, and the silence after the shove feels heavier than the noise that came before it. The broken coffee cup on the floor, the only proof that something real just happened in a room where everything is usually pretend. Spencer Tracy straightens his jacket slowly, eyes locked on John Wayne, chest rising and falling, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his mouth like he's deciding whether this is a challenge or a revelation. And the crew waits for the explosion they've seen a dozen times before when Tracy feels crossed. But it doesn't come. Instead, he lets out a short laugh, sharp and surprised, and says, "All right," like a man recalculating, like someone who just learned a rule he didn't know existed. And for the first time that day, the power in the room shifts. The director jumps back into his role, clapping his hands, calling everyone to reset, eager to pretend this was all just part of the process. But no one forgets what they just saw, because from that moment on, the rehearsal runs differently. Tracy keeps his distance. He still prowls, still pushes with his voice, still drills into every line like it matters. But the physical intimidation is gone, and Wayne notices immediately. He doesn't react, doesn't acknowledge it, just does his job, delivers his lines with that steady, unforced presence that critics never quite knew how to categorize. And something unexpected happens as the hours pass. The scene starts to work better. Without the threat of surprise contact, the tension sharpens instead of diffusing, the dialogue lands cleaner, and even Tracy seems to lean into it, focusing on the words instead of the dominance. Between takes, the crew relaxes, whispers starting up again, heads shaking in disbelief at what they've witnessed, because everyone knows Tracy tests people, and everyone knows Wayne just refused the test on his own terms. At lunch, something else happens that no one would have predicted that morning. Tracy sits down near Wayne, not across the room, not surrounded by admirers, but close enough to talk without raising his voice. He lights a cigarette, exhales slowly, and says, "Most men flinch," and Wayne answers without looking up from his plate. "Most men expect them to." And Tracy chuckles, not mockingly, but with genuine amusement, like he's found something rare. They talk quietly then, about the scene, about pacing, about how far is too far before truth turns into noise, and it becomes clear to anyone paying attention that this isn't a truce born of fear, but of recognition. Tracy respects craft, above all else, and for the first time he sees Wayne not as a symbol or a stereotype, but as a man who knows exactly who he is and where his limits are. The rest of the shoot carries that new balance. No more surprises, no more chest thumping, just two professionals doing the work, and when tempers flare elsewhere on set, someone always jokes under their breath, "Careful, or Duke will shove you back." And everyone laughs, including Tracy. Years later, a crew member would tell the story in a bar, lowering his voice like it was still dangerous to say out loud, explaining how Spencer Tracy used to bully scenes into submission until one day, he ran into someone who wouldn't bend, and how after that, Tracy changed, not completely, but enough to matter. Wayne never spoke publicly about the incident, never used it to build his legend, but he carried the lesson with him, that strength doesn't need an audience and respect doesn't come from endurance alone. It comes from knowing when to draw a line and drawing it without apology. And Tracy, for all his brilliance and volatility, learned something too, even if he never admitted it outright, because from that day forward, when he talked about Wayne, he stopped calling him just a movie star and started calling him a man who knows where he stands. And in Hollywood, where most people are still pretending, that kind of reputation lasts longer than any shove ever could. Years went by, and Hollywood kept doing what it always does, rebuilding sets, rewriting legends, polishing myths until the rough edges disappeared. But the story of that rehearsal never quite faded. It survived in quiet conversations between veteran crew members, told not with exaggeration but with a kind of respect, The way people talk about moments that reveal something true. No one framed it as a fight, because it wasn't. There were no punches thrown, no screaming matches, no headlines the next morning. What lingered was the memory of a line being drawn in a place where lines are usually blurred, and how one man refused to let intimidation pass for artistry. John Wayne never mentioned the incident in interviews, never used it to strengthen his image, because for him, it wasn't a victory to be celebrated. It was simply the cost of standing upright in an industry that often rewards those who bend. Spencer Tracy didn't speak about it publicly either, but the people who worked with him noticed the difference. He was still intense, still relentless in rehearsal, still demanding honesty from everyone in the room, but the physical testing stopped. He pushed with language now, with timing, with silence, and in a strange way the work improved. The performances grew sharper, the tension cleaner, as if even Tracy understood that force wasn't the same thing as truth. When Wayne's name came up later, Tracy no longer dismissed him as just a movie star. He didn't praise him either. He simply acknowledged him, and from a man like Tracy, that quiet recognition meant everything. Wayne carried on as he always had, moving from project to project, critics still debating his range, audiences still packing theaters to see him stand tall against impossible odds. But something subtle had changed behind the scenes. Directors knew he wouldn't tolerate games. Co-stars knew exactly where they stood with him. He didn't posture, didn't lecture, didn't threaten. He showed up, did the work, and expected the same respect in return. That reputation followed him for the rest of his career, not because of any single role, but because of moments like that one. Moments that never made the papers, but shaped how people treated him when the cameras weren't rolling. What made the story endure wasn't the shove itself, but what came after. Wayne didn't linger in the conflict, didn't try to dominate the room or prove a point twice. He drew the line once and went back to his mark, letting the silence do the rest. In a town built on illusion, that kind of restraint stood out. It reminded everyone watching that real strength doesn't announce itself, doesn't need witnesses, and doesn't require cruelty to be convincing. That rehearsal ended the way most do, with lights powering down and people heading home, but something lasting had been established. Two legends walked away understanding each other a little better, and an entire room learned that respect isn't earned by enduring disrespect. It's earned by knowing who you are, knowing what you won't accept, and standing there quietly until everyone else understands it too.